Very smart viewer just emailed to summarize the Republican policy on healthcare and did it better than I do, so I'm just going to read it. The policy is not $1 less for those who currently have health insurance, including Medicare, and not $1 more, period, for those who don't. And that is basically it, right? I mean, it's like, if you've got it, you keep it. If you don't, too bad. I want to right now bring in David K. Johnson, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, for his reporting on the U.S. tax code. He's at the New York Times. He's now with Reuters, a lecturer on tax law at Syracuse University's College of Law. Good morning, David. How are you?
Good morning, Chris. Glad to be here.
This is quickly turning into the David K. Johnston election.
Yes.
We got some more tax returns from Paul Ryan last night. The headline is that he paid an effective rate of 16% in 2010 and 20% in 2011, and he reported a combined income of over $538,000 over those 2 years, and an effective rate of about 18%. So to me, the interesting thing is, here's someone who is definitely at the upper part of the income distribution in America. He's affluent. He's paying more in taxes than Mitt Romney, who is making magnitudes more money than he is.
Romney makes more in a week than Ryan does in a year.
Right. And that, to me, is I mean, what I love about the tax discussion that we're having and the things about the tax returns has to do with not necessarily what the individual details are, but the way that we just keep getting this window on what the tax code looks like and what the income and distribution in the country looks like. Because this is a perfect example of the kind of fractal nature of inequality, right? Ryan's a rich guy in some, if you look at him in some ways, but he's not even in the same universe as Mitt Romney. And the other thing about the Ryan tax The other thing about the Ryan tax returns I thought was so interesting is that it reminded you, last night we found out that Ryan's tax returns are out. We were like, we're gonna start the show with Ryan's tax returns. And then we looked at him, it's like, oh right, most people's taxes are boring. Yeah. like it was a reminder that like Mitt Romney's taxes are super interesting.
They're like a Russian novel.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Mitt Romney's taxes are super interesting because he's worth $250 million and he makes a ton of money, and people who make that much money have really interesting taxes. Paul Ryan, who's doing well actually compared to most Americans, has pretty boring taxes.
I was going to say, his taxes aren't interesting because he makes a lot of money. His taxes are interesting because his money is flung all over the world in a dogged attempt to avoid paying taxes to the country he wants to run.
Totally un-American.
Well, is it un-American? I feel like it's
to hide your money in other countries.
Well, in certain ways, that's extremely American. I mean,
no, ironically, yes.
I mean, I think. Look, I mean,
all the irony.
Yeah, I mean,
it's kind of unpatriotic. I mean, but
I just think he's doing everything he can, including, picking a vice presidential nominee whose tax plan would actually have him paying a 0.82% tax rate to avoid contributing to the country he wants to run. I think it's actually it gets...
That's a good point. And do you think that Ryan was imposed on Romney? It seems like, no one really predicted that he would. And then there was like a groundswell in the last few weeks of Ryan. It's kind of like the Sarah Palin thing, where McCain really didn't want her. He wanted Leibowitz or
Lieberman.
He wanted Andy Leibowitz.
I'm a Jew.
It's a good thing you're Jewish, because otherwise that is a rough slip.
Ask me if I'm a Jew.
Are you a Jew?
Jewish. Anyway, no, I think that McCain reluctantly accepted her to play this so-called base thing, and now Ryan is doing the same. And the base, the word is disgusting. I mean, they are base, and the family values.
Well, they're human beings.
No, they are human beings, but they're
our fellow citizens.
They're misguided.
You try to understand them.
Yeah, no, but I mean, what are the family values? Misogyny, racism, homophobia, warmongering.
Well, look, I don't know.
That's not hyperbole, Chris. But go ahead.
Well, look, I don't want to get into an argument over the base. I mean,
I'm not arguing.
But I think I tend to try to give people the charity of.
Oh, and those people are basically decent,
right?
But there's this core of racist elements within that party that is rearing its ugly head and unashamedly race baiting, and it's disgusting.
I will say this: it is undeniably the case that racist Americans are almost entirely in one political coalition and not the other, and that's the nature of American politics at the moment. David K. Johnson, was there anything that jumped out at you in the tax returns that we saw from Paul Ryan?
Yes, I think there's two very revealing things here. Paul Ryan is right on the cusp of the top 1%. Mitt Romney is very deeply into the top 1% of the top 1%. And not only is there a higher tax rate being paid by Paul Ryan, but perhaps, I think much more significantly, it tells us about what we've done with policy in this country. The already rich get these huge tax breaks, and the striver class, the six-figure income class, they're the ones who are the most heavily taxed. That's the thing we should be paying attention to. By the way, Paul Ryan's marginal tax rate is only 28% because he's in the alternative minimum tax, which he wants to get rid of. If we got rid of it, his marginal rate will go up, presumably.
David K. Johnson, Josh Barrow has something he wants to say about that, and I think there's a really important point about where the heaviest burden of taxation falls, and we'll talk about that right after this break.